Would you like me to talk?
Yes, please.
Testing, testing.
I can hear her.
Is
Yeah,
this my
yeah,
regular
good.
voice?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just making sure.
Okay.
Just,
All right,
yeah.
good. Because you want to hear me. I
Yeah.
mean, that's kind of why I'm
Right,
here.
yeah.
She is the guest. Are we recording?
Yeah.
All right. Cheers. Mary Ann,
Yes.
thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers. And we are 6 feet away from each other.
Yeah,
Oh.
roughly.
It takes all of us. All right. So, Mary Ann McLaughlin currently serves as the managing partner. Time out. Mm-hmm. Oh, I said it wrong. It's
Yeah.
McLaughlin.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should have heard how many times he was like, McLaughlin. He's like sitting in here, I'm like,
It's not McLaughlin, but it's McLaughlin.
yeah,
McLaughlin actually is hysterical when people say that.
Well,
for a comedy themed podcast.
one for one. Mary Ann McLaughlin currently serves as a managing partner and co-owner at Butler Street with Mike Jacktow, which is a consulting firm that perfects client and talent development. Mary Ann has a bachelor's degree in marketing and psychology from Bradley University, Peoria.
Woohoo.
Yep. Her resume consists of consulting, client retention expertise, coaching executives, 30 plus years in successful sales, sales management, training C-level executive experience, and most obvious, leadership. Currently, she has led Butler Street to becoming recognized as a top 10 leadership development training company. She's a volunteer member of the American Staffing Association Women in Leadership and serves as the foundation chair on the board of St. Joseph President's Hospital in Chicago. She's also an active mentor with the Professional Women's Club of Chicago. Outside of being an absolute kick-ass businesswoman and volunteer, she runs, which has resulted in 4 marathons and several triathlons. She is currently setting her goals on qualifying for the Boston Marathon. She's a mother of 2, a sister, a wife, but above all else, she will need your thoughts and prayers because she's agreed to be our very first guest. So, Mary Ann.
Ouch.
You're right, yeah. Thank you so much for coming on to the show.
My pleasure. Okay, so I just have to say, you now went public with my Boston Marathon goal.
Right, yeah. So, no going,
Thanks.
no going
No
back.
going back.
Yeah, we really locked you into that one.
Well, my brother told me that.
Yeah.
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 It's
I had gone semi-public. Now it's total public. So
Well, technically, this is a recording, so it's not public yet.
fair.
So to start, I want to go back to Bradley.
Okay.
In Old Peoria. Are you born and raised from Peoria?
I am born and raised in Peoria.
Okay.
Yes.
You see this koozie I have? I have Jimmy's Bar koozie. Right here.
I know the Cruisins.
Yes. Oh yeah. So fresh into college, did you have an idea of where you wanted to go career-wise? Kind of take me back to like your mentality of going into college, because like everybody has their own reason to go or not to go. So like kind of take us back there and what your mentality was.
Okay, this might surprise you.
Okay.
My mentality as a senior in high school was to get married and have babies.
Wow.
I had no desire to go to college. I went to Manual High School, so you're probably familiar with Manual.
Yeah.
Manual has about 5% of the students that go on to some higher education. So it was like not a thing. It was home ec and wood shop and that kind of stuff. And I had a long-term boyfriend, and that's just kind of what I thought my next step was going to be. And one of my teachers and counselors said, no, you're going to college.
Oh wow.
Yes.
So they kind of forced you.
They did. They said, what are you thinking here? Because I was in the advanced classes, and my brother, just as a side note, we can talk about him later, is a rocket scientist.
Wow.
Who's just a year
Literally?
older than me. Yeah, literally. That's his. I mean, he's brilliant.
Wow.
So I have a tiny bit of those genes, so kind of like, it's in the family. So they were, you have Tim, the rocket scientist, and then me, who's like, I'm just going to get married. Mm-hmm. So that didn't compute with most people. So my counselor, who I'm forever indebted to, was a Bradley supporter. And he said, here's the deal. I can get you some financial aid at Bradley University. Give it a semester. And I loved it.
Really?
Like every single second of it. Yes, I did break up with my hometown boyfriend about a month into school. And that was my mentality.
So you were kind of brought into this whole new world, and did you kind of figure out that it's like, wow, I can actually make something of myself instead of just kicking back and having kids?
Yeah, so it was, actually wasn't that easy. Or wasn't that kind of a turn. It was, fortunately for me, my high school best friend's father was a You guys will love this. He was the speech professor at Bradley.
Okay.
So she was going because she could go for free. So my best friend was my roommate. She had no interest really in going in college, but at least we had the same background and we knew each other well. So we were able to support each other into this college experience. What was a real, like, sort of head fake was everybody was so intense and so rich relative. Like, we are so out of our league. It took a while to be like, I think we can make some adjustments here.
Okay. Okay. What grade roughly did you figure out, like, career path like this? I have an idea of what I want to do.
I think I knew I wanted to be in business from the beginning. I started as an accounting major, and because math was kind of my thing. And so I figured, well, that's the math thing, right? And I realized that was extremely boring. And
So boring. I just took my first accounting class. It was horrible. I
It's-
was like, accounting is not me.
yeah, I mean, conceptually, you think, okay, this is like,
Yeah.
it's like smart stuff. And oh,
Mm-hmm. It's
yeah,
monotonous.
dreadful.
It's horrible.
So I took a marketing class and research, actually, and I loved it. And so I really started to take research and sales classes, and the sales class was actually the one that got me really convinced that that's the direction I wanted to go, because the sales teacher was an IBM salesman, and it was a night class.
Okay.
So it just was like he was the real deal, and it was fun. And I'm like, okay, now I can do this.
Yeah.
So,
That's super
Yeah.
cool.
That's awesome.
It's like I always find that so interesting because, I mean, when I was getting out of high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had some scholarships for sports, but I knew if I went to school, I was like, I'm just going to waste my time and my money because I have no idea what I want to do. So, and I was so jealous of everybody in my class that was like, yeah, I'm going to be this. Like, I'm going to do this. And then I was like, I don't have an answer for you. I have zero idea. So the different routes people take is very interesting to me. And then, but I also don't think like college should be so forced as it is right now. Go ahead.
I'm completely with you. I have to back you up a second and say, you feel like everybody had their act together. It's
Yeah.
so not true.
Right.
It's so not true. Like, everybody thinks everybody else has their act together. So that's one thing. But I completely agree with you. And I suspect that with COVID, this whole like college being the path and this way to go, it has to change.
Virtual school sucks.
I agree completely.
It sucks.
Can I interject real quick? So, yeah, that's why you guys gave me a mic, so I can interject. Yeah, I will agree because I have a very similar like story as where people were like, "What do you want to do for college?" While I was going through high school, I'd be meeting with counselors. I'd be like, sort of deal, and it just kind of was like, I don't really see any benefit in it because I'd been working every summer with my dad in marketing.
Exactly.
So I was like, oh, it kind of feels like a waste to go learn marketing.
When I've already been
Been doing it, and I sit in all these meetings and stuff, and so I got there, and then they wanted you to dress up and do the whole thing, and I was like, that's not me. Like, I'm not, like, if that's what you, like they wanted me to wear a tie and do these things, and I was like, I'll wear like a t-shirt and a jacket, but like, that's it, sort of deal, and kind of kept moving through, and then finally they were like, why don't you just do the communication department? So that's where I found like broadcasting and all that. And then, fast forward to me taking classes at Second City meeting Michael, and here we are.
You're welcome.
And you're still in school.
I am still in school. I'm at DePaul.
Okay.
I actually,
Blue Devils.
I actually met Michael on accident.
That happens a lot,
Yeah,
from what I
by
understand.
extreme accident. We were on the way up to ship out to basic training, and his driver,
Got a flat tire or something.
or went in a ditch, and
So I
we
had
had
to
to
cram into his car.
I love that.
Yeah, I was like so pumped. I was like, "Sweet, we're gonna get this started." And my driver's like, "We have to go an hour out of the way." I was like, "For what?" And then,
For me.
yeah, for
That's
him.
crazy.
Yep.
But then, like, fast forward our story, we had the same hotel room in Chicago to ship out to BMT. Like, we sat next to each other on the flight. We were put into the same military flight, and then that's like 8.5 weeks.
Yeah.
And then we were shipped to the same tech school in Virginia Beach. And then for our first station, he got to go to California. and I got to go to Wyoming. Anyway,
that sounds like fate was like trying to keep you guys no, and you guys would like split up for a minute and then be put back together.
We did road trip.
And then fate was like, you guys probably had enough of each other.
That's
Wyoming,
right.
California.
All right, enough about us. We suck. So your career. What was your first job out of college?
So as I went through like my last couple of years in college, I really wanted to focus in on sports marketing. Mm-hmm. So I'm like that kid that like gym was my favorite class. I get that, right? Yeah. Recess and gym, my favorite class.
I hear you.
So absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that's cool when kids say that. I do. Anyway, I thought that would be a really cool thing to go into, not realizing that there's very few jobs. There were very few jobs back then in sports marketing. But the Civic Center was opening that year, and the Peoria, now Rivermen, prior were called Prancers. I don't know if you know that.
I'm so glad they changed it.
Yes, the Peoria Prancers, and it was a reindeer logo.
Oh.
Yes. So they were just coming to Peoria. It's a new sport. They needed a marketing person. Voila.
No way,
so,
you got it?
Yeah.
Oh,
so I was like the public relations, and I am using air quotes here, salesperson, marketing person for this hockey organization that was a farm league of the Calgary Flames. So it was really an interesting time. It was like a startup, but you had the Calgary players would come down,
right,
and or their farm leagues, so they had some of these kids that were really going to be good and were being well taken care of by the parent companies, and then just the scrappy kids that wanted to play. And everybody in Peoria was kind of angry about the Civic Center because there was this tax that they didn't get to vote on, and hockey. So I'm going literally door to door trying to sell program advertising and group tickets and things like that. But it had the best time. It was kind of that good crosswalk between college and real life.
Yeah. Getting to put the skills to test.
Yes. And it was really like 80 parties a year because there were 80 games a year.
Oh, wow.
It was like after the games, everybody went out, like our team with the hockey teams and the groupies. And so it was another big party. and then, yeah, it was. It was a great job. They made no money. They were going bankrupt. And I think I nearly went down with the ship. So then I moved to a real job. I got a job with Standard Register, which is a printing company in sales. And I only took the job to get out of Peoria. I'm like, I've got to find an opportunity to get somewhere bigger. And this is a national company. They have offices everywhere. And so truly my goal was to just do a couple years there. And I was there for 20 years. I mean, I really loved it. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's remarkable.
Yeah.
For the record, I would put it out there that like level A, double A, triple A, like whatever sport is almost better than going to the real stuff because beer's cheaper and the tickets are cheaper and it's so fun.
So fun.
Some of my best like childhood memories, my dad taking us to Riverman games and he's like, eat what you want.
Right.
It was great. So I will tell you, you guys will appreciate this. It was kind of like everybody was a utility player there. Yeah. So at one point we had, I can't even remember the guy's name, but he was like the son of a famous sports announcer from Milwaukee. Okay. And he did the games on the radio. So you sit up in that box, and you're doing the play-by-play and all that kind of stuff. And so one time he said, Mary Ann, would you like to do color with me in the booth or whatever? It wasn't even a booth. It was a table. And I said, sure. But I was so into the game and I knew all the players. So I asked him, like, what should I do? And he's like, oh, just, describe whatever, the color of the uniforms or a little statistic about them, like just kind of, jump in. I said, okay. So we start and like the game is going and I'm cheering. So I'm screaming in the microphone, like every time something happens. And he's like looking at me like, stop it. And he like kicked me out after about 10 minutes. He's like, this is not working. No. So a little nervous about this whole microphone thing. Oh,
yeah.
No, yeah, listen, you can say whatever you want, and no one will ever hear it unless you go, that was good.
Yes, can we do over?
Looking back at your career, is there like one particular just terrible, awful, like learning, like failure moment that you're like, that was awful at the time, but looking back, I learned so much from it.
Oh my gosh, there's so many. So one of the first ones was I had a customer who was really, really mean. He didn't actually want to do business with us, but he was told to. It was one of those kind of things, right? So every time I would go and see him, and I'm maybe a year into the job at Standard Register, which is a printing and label company, and he runs a hospital. And so he gave me a couple of orders that were needed like immediately. He said, I need these in 10 days. And they were really, it was really hard to make something like that in 10 days. But of course I was too nervous to tell him that. So I said, okay. So I leave and I say, okay, yeah, we'll do it. And then I'm on the phone and I'm begging our plants to get everything done. And they're moving mountains to get this done. These are emergency room forms. So I'm thinking they're life or death, right? They're emergency room. The people come to the emergency room, you need the forms. And on the form is a label. So you go in and it prints out all this information about you. And then they take the labels and they put them on the blood tubes that you take and different things like that, right? So I get a call from our plant that's doing the label portion of it. And they said, hey, do these labels go on the test tube the long way or around, the circular way? And I was way too afraid to call the guy and ask him. So I just chose something. I just made it up. I'm like, the long way. Why? And they said, well, it makes a difference because they put the blood in a centrifuge thing, which is a thing that circles really fast. And the labels could fly off if we make them the wrong way. So now I'm too afraid to tell him that I just made it up, right? Yeah. So I am just praying that this is all working. So when the samples came in, so we delivered them, and there's a whole other story behind that, but they got there on time. There was maybe 2 emergency room forms left when the box arrived that I actually hand delivered. But I grabbed a sample and I put a label on the test tube the way I told him, and I watched it, and I would put it and spun it around in water, and I did all kinds of things. I actually still have it in my drawer at home to remind me to never do anything that stupid. Wow. Because think about it. I mean, if your blood labels were attached to someone else's, sorry, whoever's listening to this, that was a really bad move. Nobody died, and I did choose the right answer. Right. But I learned a huge lesson.
Wow. When did you move to Taylor Communications?
So that was Standard Register, actually.
Oh, okay.
It got purchased by Taylor after I left.
Okay. Mm-hmm. But you were an executive there, and I read that you were an executive there, and you did work. And you had the best team in the industry, and you grew your sales, or your $1 million client sales from 17 to 211.
Yes.
That's insane.
Yes. So that's interesting. Anything that was on my LinkedIn or any background that said Standard Register now says Taylor. So that's kind of that. So it was Standard Register at the time. And this is actually where I got connected to Mike, and that's how we've been business partners ever since. Gotcha. So we, as a company, were very focused on customer service and taking care of the people next door, business card orders or letterhead orders, anything that they needed, small. We were small and customer service oriented. So Mike comes in. He had been with another company, and he very shortly said, you all have the best products, you have amazing training, and you're playing way too small. We got to go after these big accounts because it takes the same effort. So he built a national account group. So that's where I was able to join into the national account group right when he was building it. And really, at that time, we had only 11 accounts nationally that bought $1 million or more with us. And it was that was our target. We only could go after $1 million or more accounts.
Wow.
So it was so fun.
Oh my
yeah.
goodness.
Awesome. Yeah.
So obviously with that success, you have to work as a team, obviously. Mm-hmm. So with that team in mind, what, pretty much in your opinion, what make or breaks a team pursuing one common goal?
Oh, that's a tough one. Well, pursuing one common goal is the secret sauce, right? You have to be able to articulate it, and you have to be able to make sure that everybody agrees to it from a team perspective, because you can say yes, I'm on board, or I agree, but if the actions don't match, it's pretty obvious right away. So I think that's the most important thing is, do we all know where we're going? Do we have a North Star? And are we willing to work as a team to get there?
Right.
So
Right.
without that, I think it's hard no matter where you are, no matter how big or small the team is. You probably have heard the 4 cornerstones of success a few times from your brother.
Yep.
So that to me really sums everything up. It's the 4 cornerstones start with the first 2 are get your mind right. It's attitude and personal accountability. And if you don't have the right attitude, and if you're not willing to take personal accountability for your failures or for what you said you were going to do or your role on the team, then everything breaks down. And then, so that's just about getting your mind in the right place, and then you get your actions right. So perseverance, which we all know how that feels, right? And habit. And that's probably the hardest is getting
The consistency.
getting the right habits and getting rid of the bad habits. And that takes a team to be able to call people out to say, dude,
How much does ego actually affect like the business world?
She's like, how much time? How
I was
long?
gonna say, like, on a scale of what to what?
Because I mean, like looking at the business world, I mean, it seems pretty obvious that, like, hey, and especially sales, like, hey, we want you to sell, or we want to sell this. Will you buy it? Yes or no? But it's just interesting how one person with a hot head, or they're just too full of themselves, can take it all away.
Mm-hmm. I can't say how much does ego affect it, because I think ego affects everything, right?
No, I agree.
But I do hope, and I'm kind of switching the direction here just a tiny bit, because I've been thinking about this a lot from a COVID perspective. The ego leadership, the ego behaviors and that kind of thing that may have worked pre-COVID can't work now, because people have to be much more, they have to communicate in a different way, right? You're not ever really together from a work perspective. So if you're a hothead, or if you're not good at speaking your true feelings and getting it out there, you're going to suffer. And people are really uncomfortable with that, myself included. It's just not the way, you haven't been like super emotional about conversations, and vulnerability has been sort of swept under the rug in business. And now it's like the price of success. So I think the ego piece of it, I believe, will be more under control than it maybe has been in the past. That's my prediction.
Can I ask? Okay, never mind. Keep it moving. So what do you think between authenticity and vulnerability? Like, how do you think that those play hand in hand, or do you not think they do?
Oh, I think they completely do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They're almost the same thing. Because if you truly are your authentic self, then you're going to not be worried about being vulnerable in a situation where you may not know, or you may have made a mistake, or whatever it might be. Right. And just even, again, it kind of goes back to the vulnerability piece probably pulls in the feelings a little bit more. Like, are you okay?
Because in my head, I always made the connection of, like, authenticity is kind of what you said, where vulnerability was kind of swept under the rug. It's like the vulnerability without the emotions for business. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like they made a new thing. They're like, we made a new word, so we don't got to worry about it.
We're just going to be authentic.
Yeah, it's authentic. Yeah, the word's authentic instead of vulnerable.
Yeah, they have to be together, or you're really not being authentic. That's a good point. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't know. Did any of you grow up with dads who were like the strong, silent type?
Oh yeah.
No, I mean,
my dad was pretty obvious about how he was feeling.
Right? Yeah, my dad's he's got a temper a little bit sometimes.
I'm not saying that about my dad.
but like just the fact that, like, my dad will, like, he's very. I think that's where I learned authenticity from, is from my father, and not that he's a hothead, because like he's just he's not. He's so cool, but he's like very. Direct. Like, this is how I feel. You know what I mean? And I'm always just like, whoa, calm down, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's how, like, I'm like, yo, quit being a hothead. But like,
Go home and thank him.
yeah, I know, right? He gave me so much emotional intelligence, and I just can't even grasp it.
Yeah, the rest of us have to figure it out.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's true.
I want to switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about improv.
Okay.
Because obviously Robert Reed, a Second City alumni, you hired him. I'm curious about the first time you saw improv mesh with the business world, and was that the time where like it hit your head like, oh, I should bring this into my own company, or did it take a couple of times? Kind of elaborate on how that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So actually, Robert Reed came into our company because of you.
Obviously.
Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
So I had worked with Robert's brother, Richard. He was a strategic sales guy in one of my organizations, and I adored him. And I was with your brother, speaking to Michael's brother, and he was telling me that you were interested in improv. And I'm like, I know a guy whose brother is in improv. I've never met him, but like Richard's a great guy. So I just called Richard right then. And I said, hey, my friend's brother wants to meet your friend's brother to talk improv. And he's like, he doesn't do improv anymore, or he isn't in Chicago anymore. That's what I thought. He was still in Chicago. And he's like, he's moved back to Florida and he started his own company. And I was like, oh, wow. And he said, well, I'll text you, his phone number. So I called Robert and told him about you. And he's like, oh, happy to help him. I'd love to talk to him. And so I asked him a little bit about what he was doing. He said, oh, I just started my own company about, 8 months ago to do improv. And he was telling me about his Second City, that he had done some corporate training. And so he was trying to get that kicked off the ground. He said, I love the improv stuff. I'm not that good at sales. That's not my thing. When he was in staffing, he had done recruiting. So he knew sort of our strike zone. We're focused on the staffing industry. So he already had staffing background. He's an improv guy and needed help with sales. And I'm thinking, okay, there's probably a connection here. Mm-hmm. And this was pre-COVID, so it wasn't all about the virtual stuff. So I said, we're always looking for, additional trainers. And I didn't know whether or not the improv would fit at that point in terms of into what we did, but I thought it'd be a nice add-on. So he's like, I'm in. Like, let's have a conversation. So he came to one of our live training sessions, and afterward he said, you guys are funny. Like, you have funny things in there. Like, the part of the training really is enjoyable. I think that I could add a few improv exercises and really it would fit well and not take away from the content. And so I just picked up the book Yes and started to like really understand. You got it. Yeah. Yes. And I had seen a Harvard Business Review article about leadership training and how many people were using improv. And so I was like, all right, let's do this. Let's build it in. And it's been so great. So great for our training.
With the customers, or maybe just your overall employees, like what's the biggest difference you see improv bring out of people from the business world?
Yeah, so I think from the folks that are being trained, they are much faster to be open. Because you know how like it takes a while to warm an audience up and to get them to speak, and we're giving them new skills and then asking them to practice a voicemail, practice being in front of a customer and, getting an objection. And so he very quickly adds some things in the very front part of the training to make people vulnerable and laugh and be okay with just messing up. Right. And so that really did help a lot of just give that comfort to people to be able to do it, but still keep the tension high enough that they're learning, so that from a learner perspective was great. The customers, I think also it's just different. It's so unique. People go to sales training and leadership training and all kinds of training, and you don't get that kind of enjoyment. It's not, it's just
absolutely
so different.
The leadership classes I've taken are like, all right, everybody sit down in this auditorium. We're going to click through this PowerPoint. Yeah, it's horrible. I'm very interested in this because I know improv people. I don't do it myself. And then I'm very interested in the business world. So hearing it sounds very interesting. I'm intrigued.
Have you ever done Tony Robbins?
I've done his virtual comeback challenge.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So I got a chance we did it like a team building thing through the company. And it was out in Schaumburg. It was one of the coolest things. And you're like so pumped up and you're like, and it was like the fire walk and they were like getting you pumped up for like 12 hours. It's just like dancing to music and you're like, what? And they're like, you can do whatever you want. They're like, you just gotta take it. And I'm like, I'm gonna take it. And it was just like insane. And you're like, and then I just remember getting to the fire walk and I'm like sitting there the whole time, like, this is gonna be awesome. I'm gonna walk on fire. It's gonna be great. And then I get to the front of the line and they're like, you're next. And I'm like, I don't remember how to walk on the fire. And I'm like, I don't even remember them brushing over that. You know what I mean? They were just like, you got this. And they were gave no steps. And then I was like, all right. And I looked at the guy in front of me. I'm like, oh, it can't be that hard. So I just looked up and was thinking about cold things. Cause that's what they told you. They're say cool moss and walk across. And I was like, okay. So I did it. And I was like, oh my God, my feet didn't catch on fire. This was super cool. I feel empowered. I was like, who knows what I can accomplish next? But I've been in those and I've also been in leadership ones where they're but still with that one, it was just pumping you up. It was giving you the confidence.
Walking on fire sounds way better.
It
right.
Really
yeah.
does.
Cause you're not so it's a cool thing. It's expensive, but it's definitely worth it to get in that mindset. But it was just it was mind blowing. But I mean, also I've been in ones that are you should be a leader. Click.
It's kind of insane that we'd rather walk on fire than look at
Sit in an auditorium. I would sign me up for that too. I'd rather walk on fire.
Right? I'd rather walk on something that someone just dumped out coals and torched instead of someone's I spent 4 weeks preparing this PowerPoint. And I'll be like, I'm sorry, man. I'm going to walk on the fire.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And the other thing that's been really, really good for us and for the learners is so much of improv, these two know that, is about being very good listeners, as it is with leadership and sales and business, and being able to listen and have good conversations and continue conversations, which is the whole yes and all the listening exercises. So we have found it's very easy to tie it back to our training, and people, that's highly memorable, like you're walking on fire, way more than if somebody had it on a PowerPoint. You should be a good listener, right?
Yeah.
It's a part of effective communication, which obviously is a point of sales. If you can't talk to and connect to the people you're trying to bring in, I mean, you're going to fail instantly.
That's right. Right.
And with sales and improv, I have to imagine that it kind of not necessarily got rid of the old-fashioned call scripts. You picture the call center with a giant book for every scenario.
Yes.
But I feel with improv, because I started, making sales calls at a company, and it was here's a script, here's this, and I was like, okay. And then I was like, but people don't want to talk to someone reading from a piece of paper.
So interesting you said that. So we're big fans of scripts.
Okay.
But no, this is good.
No, I was curious.
It comes up all the time because people, here's what I would ask you. What's a movie that made you cry?
Marley and Me.
That was a script.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
But it was so well known in the person who was saying it that they were able to put their own spin on it and add emotion and things like that. So if you're going to have a script, don't read it.
Right.
Know it. So that's the kind of thing, what we don't want our salespeople to do, or anyone that has to be in a situation that you can prepare for, is to use their brain power thinking about what they should say.
Right.
You want to use your brain power thinking about what this relationship is, and am I communicating effectively, and how are they receiving it, instead of what words should I come up with. So that's why we want the script portion of it.
Yeah, and the short little stint I did spend in sales, I was I realized people wanted to talk more when I was focused more on how can I help you? What can I get you from this exchange, as opposed to you should pay me money and I'll get commission. You know what I mean? It's a terrible way to start off a call. I'll give you that.
It really is, but you'd be shocked at how many people do. Not exactly those words, but Bush might as well. Do you know that's our motto? Solve your customers' problems, you'll solve your own.
Yeah.
So just try to figure out what their problems are, give them something, and they'll give you the business.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, but every single training class, you have people that are like, oh no, scripts. That comes up all the time. And my thought was with Robert from an improv perspective that he would be the antithesis of a script.
Right.
He's probably more like, I need to know exactly what this is about and the words that are going to happen and what I need to say than anybody. And I'm like, wait a minute, that doesn't compute. You're an improv guy. But it's the same concept, right? You know what you're trying to accomplish and you practice that a lot before you actually go live.
Well, and those scripts, like one of my biggest takeaways from improv and a writing class I did, obviously, is that like you can't rewrite something. Like you can rewrite something an infinite amount of times. Like it can pretty much always get better. Like there is a chance of like overwriting, I guess. But it's like when it comes to putting like creativity on paper, it's people. I mean, I'm guilty myself. I would put something down and I'm like, oh, this is amazing, and then I show it to my teacher and he's just like, no, it's not. You know why? Because like it can do this. You could say this and this and that and this and that. So it's interesting that because I understand why he was so hard on like I need to understand every part of the picture so that way he can maximize it to like its limit.
Exactly.
So I get it.
Yeah.
I 100% get what he's saying.
Yep. I just want to add one more thing.
No, go ahead.
So for me personally, he has given me permission to be sillier.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that, because that just is like,
I think everybody needs
Yeah.
I think life
everybody
stand to have more of that.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think even in business that would have to play a better, because I would, like I am personally tired of getting on a call and being like, hi. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like silliness is gotta go hand in hand with the authenticity and the vulnerability that we were talking about. Like it's, you know what I mean? It's all encompassed in that where you gotta like, it just helps break that down. It's probably even better in sales, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And it's certainly better in training. So it's, and who doesn't love to laugh?
Right. Yeah.
My brother's going to kill me for this, but that reminded me of, he took me to like a junior board meeting for, I don't know, one of the things he does. And we were sitting in this conference room and like people were filing in and it was just, like the small conversations were driving me nuts because they felt so forced. And I was like, can someone just
have some
yell,
fun?
like scream something? And, like it felt like robots were walking in, but they were all like around his age, so it's not like it was like a crazy age difference or anything. And I was just like right there, I was like, yeah, I made the correct choice of not going into business school. Because the small combos, I was just like, I can't.
Well,
That's a true talent.
It is a true talent. But I will say, I've been exposed to the board. I don't know if it is. Was it actually being held in the hospital corporate office?
No, it was in the hospital. It was
Okay.
downtown in the workspace, I think.
Okay, because they're very buttoned up.
It was for the hospital.
Okay.
staff.
Okay.
And he was like, yeah, I want you to come to it. You can learn from it. I was like, I didn't learn anything. People are robots. That's why.
I was waiting for someone's batteries to fall out. Like,
Exactly.
it's like, oh, those are my 9 volts.
So through your entire life, I'm curious, what does Mary Ann think like her biggest talents are, and what is something you're just awful at?
What is something I what?
Or like completely awful at that like you should, like a person in your position should be better at, or like what's the most useless talent you have?
Oh,
And
wow.
it doesn't have to be business, it can be anything.
We're bringing up honesty.
Yes. Let's see. What I'm really, really awful at is singing.
Same.
I mean, but I'm also very competitive, and I believe that anybody can learn anything. So years ago, maybe like 5 years ago, I said to my family, I think I can learn to sing. Because why couldn't I learn to
Right.
sing,
Why not?
right?
Why not?
Why not? Get lessons, practice, I should be able to learn to sing. So, and they're like, no, not you. But it's like, you can't learn to sing. And so that it just became a long running joke until Christmas when I got singing lessons. as a Christmas present from my family, which
How
was
excited were you?
horrified.
Yeah.
So I ended up going to these singing lessons in a place similar to this. Like I'm like, in
Your
this.
closet.
Yeah, no, like just a small place, but it was a living space as well. The woman who's that's teaching me, and I actually was improving, but not to the point where I wanted to get on stage. And at one point, I know I'm taking this story too far, but so at one point I'm practicing my song, and this. I don't even remember what song it was, but I remember the song that I'm going to tell part of the story about. So, and in comes her next client, and she's like, "Oh, Joe, come on in." And I'm like, "Wait, you're inviting somebody into my singing lesson?" And so she's like, he's like on plays, and he does like, this is his profession, and he's just honing his skill. And so she's like, "Why don't you guys do a duet?" So she sets up like the Aladdin song. And so he's like, I say, "I can't sing." So he sings, "I Can Show You the World Like," and it bellows it out. And it's just great. And the stuff comes up, and then it's my turn. And I'm like, "Hey, can show you." I was in a full body sweat. It was like awful. And I never went back.
Never, that was it.
I did karaoke though, just to prove that I can like get through a song. And that was my,
That's my kind of singing.
yeah.
How many more grades do we have?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, no, but I'm glad I did it. But so.
Well, and I think with like the whole singing thing, like it doesn't. I think it just comes down to like the letting yourself fail. You know what I mean? Like in order to learn the skill. No.
No, he's right.
I'm just saying
He's
is
right.
like you should know better than anyone.
No, I
It's that and letting yourself be embarrassed.
Right.
I think,
And it's like that's like I would argue the hardest skill in ever to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Singing?
No,
like
just
knowing
being able to like
Yeah.
fail, but
Yeah.
like fail with confidence.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think Breanne Brown said that singing is second to being naked, that vulnerability. And I couldn't do it. I would be like, "Get John out of here."
our first class of improv, level A, I was like, "Man, please no singing." Literally the first game was, our teacher was, get in a circle, someone starts singing a song, whatever song like you kind of relate that to, jump in the circle and start singing it.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, you know what? I know I'm going to be doing this for a while. So I forgot the song, but I jumped in and just pretty much spoke loudly and then followed suit. And it was like, it's a teaching moment, and it's very interesting that you were like, "I'm so awful at it, I might as well give it a shot."
Mm-hmm.
Because I wish more people would do that, because, I mean, yeah, the lessons you learn from just taking that leap are endless.
Yeah, you learn so much about yourself, and that's exactly what I learned. Man, I am so nervous,
Yeah.
And there wasn't even anyone around. Like it was like
Right.
It's crazy.
I'm very interested about this. So I want to know the best advice you've ever received, and then I also want to know the worst.
Oh, that's such a good question. I should have better answers, like ready to go for that one. The best advice. The best advice I ever received probably was from my mother. I grew up between two boys. My brother was 10 months older than me, and my other brother was like 13 months younger. So we were boom, boom, boom. Mm-hmm. And she said, "You can do anything they can do. Don't ever think you can't do anything." We called them the boys, right? The boys can do. And so from 4 years old, I'm like, "Yeah, I can do anything the boys can do." And that was such great voice. Yeah, that was great advice.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
What about the worst?
Worst advice.
Where someone said something, you're like, "What?"
I'm sure it was something to do with going out with somebody or something.
It always is, isn't it?
Yeah. You should date him.
If you could get the total truth to any question possible, what question would you want answered?
Wow, that is a great question. The total truth to any question. What happens after you die?
That is.
Greatest question.
That's literally what I was gonna be like if she doesn't say it.
I actually just got today in the mail a book called Some. and it's supposedly, well, it's supposed to be a great book, but it's 40 short stories about what happens after you die.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I know.
That's really cool.
Yeah, neat. Like just different things to consider.
Have you started it?
No, I mean literally came like an hour before I left. I was like, oh, I'm so glad it's here. So I want the total truth.
So you're obviously an avid reader.
Yes.
Top 3 books, different genres, and like what was your biggest takeaway from that?
Wow.
Because I hate reading.
You hate reading?
But I'm starting, like I know it's important, and I know I can learn so much from it. So I'm like, that's pretty much my only reason to do it. I'm like, it'll only benefit me in the long run.
Yeah.
So just do it, but I just get bored.
Okay. Well, I devour books. I will give you some advice. So my reading was mostly to help my career for the majority of my life. It was like, I love psychology. So anything that has to do with like the way the brain thinks and works, those are like my favorites. And they like the neuroplasticity of your brain, like how you can change your mind to change the outcomes of your life are life-changing for me. Those are probably the most like aha moments that I get out of books like that. But what I didn't do until maybe about 10 years ago was read just random books, like novels and throwaway like beach books. I never did that because I felt like, I gotta read books to make me smarter. And those are the best books ever because they're stories. They're not boring, but they give you some really interesting perspectives and language, like words you don't normally use. They don't talk about, let's take that offline. They don't say things that they say in business, right? Yeah. They're just different phrases. And I'll find myself reading books and I'm like, well, that's a cool way to say that. I've never heard anybody sort of phrase something that way. And I don't know. So I know I'm not answering your question about specific books. I guess I have so many.
Boring was a bad word, but I mean, I guess it's true in my opinion, obviously. But I was reading Tim Ferriss's Tools of Titans.
Yes.
And I love it because he pretty much tells you, don't read this like a book. Like, read it for the only people you're interested in, and stuff like that. And so I'm reading it, and then all of a sudden I'm like, I want to like actually remember what I'm reading. So I go and get some sticky notes. So like in my Tools of Titans, I just pretty much write down like whoever I'm reading, like my biggest takeaway from it.
Oh, that's really smart.
Then if I'm like dealt with a scenario in life that one of those refers to, I'm like, what did this person do? Do it.
So perfect. I love the way Tim Ferriss has put that stuff together because it's like huge cliff notes.
I would agree that I'm not super like I'm not super going in like I'm gonna go read. Like I can read like I can read. That is a great statement to make. Yeah.
This is good.
But I always like you said, I always veer more towards like the novels and the things like that. I didn't necessarily get into the ones that were gonna help benefit. Like if someone recommends it to me, but I've never gone out and been like, I need to learn a skill. Let me find a book. I'm always like, let me find a YouTube video or a podcast or like something that'll tell me, or like an article, like WikiHow's great, but I mean, not for everything. But
well, I think you learn things differently. Like you remember things differently when you read them versus when you hear them or when you watch them. So I think it just depends on where you feel like the most relaxed, probably, to take in the learning.
Right.
Are you a hands-on learner, or can you read something and it's in there?
I'm a reader and take notes.
Okay.
Now there are some things that like stick with you. Like you read it and you're like, wow, that like. I've got that. But no, I actually, I'm a big fan of listening to like Brene Brown's podcast and then picking up the book, or Entree Leadership and then picking up the book. So listening to the person talk about what their story was, and then I'm like, I want more. So it's kind of a second hit,
Gotcha.
Or Tim Ferriss's podcasts.
He's He had Jerry Seinfeld on the other day and just like talk about how to dive into your creativity, and it's super interesting.
Oh, I'll bet.
Highly recommend it. I mean, Jerry Seinfeld.
Yes, I'm loving all your stuff over there. So Boston was one of my favorite albums growing up.
My first concert.
Really?
Yes.
My favorite band.
Yeah? I love it.
I enjoy it a lot. I don't think it's my favorite, and I've never seen them in concert.
Okay.
So that's all I can add to it.
Okay, but you're just like, okay,
So
they're
you
cool.
can
Yes.
Yeah.
That was played constantly. So what was your first concert?
REO Speedwagon.
Oh.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it was great.
Yep.
I think mine was Alan Jackson, but I was really young. So my parents were like, we'll take him to a country concert. To say we took him to a concert, so they took me there. And and not that I grew up in Indiana. So country music's everywhere. And I was like, this is awesome. And then I saw, but like, it was just like my first like big concert, was probably AC/DC, and that was at Wrigley Field.
Wow.
It was like my first one that I'm always like, I don't want to tell people Alan Jackson. So I'm always like AC/DC. I know, but I'm so authentic.
Right.
Honestly,
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, so mine was Engelbert Humperdinck. Just kidding.
Don't know how to say word for that.
It was actually Diana Ross.
Oh.
So, yeah. So, again, being from Peoria, pre-Civic Center, and going to Bradley, that wasn't like a big concert venue really ever around. So she was one of the first early concerts there. So,
Wow.
yeah.
So speaking of music, who would perform at your Super Bowl halftime show, and then what message would you want them to send?
Who would perform at my Super Bowl halftime show? Gosh.
Like no scheduling conflicts, we can get them. Like
okay,
anyone.
Anyone.
Right.
they can even be dead.
Yeah, we'll bring him back from the dead. Yeah.
Awesome. This is not it. It's not making it easier. It's making it harder. Think of anybody.
Yeah, we're really expanding
ever.
the search.
Gosh. Because I'm thinking they have to sing and dance, and they have to be loved by all. That's a very we're limiting now.
Yeah.
But this is your
this is
Super
your
Bowl.
Super Bowl.
Yeah, no one needs to like him but
It's
you.
about anybody else.
Oh,
This
okay.
is your Super Bowl.
Okay, so I think my Super Bowl, I would have Elvis Presley.
That's a good one. The king himself.
Yeah, I think just because you're just off the charts talented, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My dad's mom, my grandma, was a big fan of Elvis. It's going to sound awful, but I remember pictures of him at her funeral.
Wow, she was that big of a fan.
Yes.
And see, I wasn't a huge fan growing up, but just as you sort of really take in the talent and the life and all of the different things, and I just think it'd be super entertaining.
Have you been to his house in Tennessee?
I have not.
Oh, you gotta go.
Yeah?
It's awesome. It's insane.
I think that would be really fun.
What's something you would always pay top dollar for? Like there's no cutting it. You always want the best thing of this.
I'm so cheap.
I'm pretty cheap also.
I mean, really.
I say I'm smart with my money, but it turns out I ain't kinda cheap.
What do I want the best of? I honestly don't pay top dollar for anything.
Great value.
I overpay for a lot of things.
Yeah.
So don't get me wrong. I probably, let's say, coats.
Okay.
Winter coats.
Gotta be warm.
Yeah, they got to be warm and they have to look good, and that's tough in Chicago.
Yeah.
So I would pay way more than I probably should for a really nice coat.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've been coat shopping, and I agree.
Yeah.
Because I'm like,
Good.
where are these coats?
Chicago is filled with the Canadian Goose jackets.
Yeah,
Those-
I don't have one of those, but
I don't either.
I've got. I was actually in Canada, and in October, and it was not supposed to be as cold as it was, and it was freezing, and I had a wimpy coat. I'm like, I'm in Canada. They have coats
Right.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Gorgeous, big, thick coats, and really inexpensive.
Oh.
So I didn't have to pay top dollar and get a Canadian Goose coat.
You heard it here first. You need a winter jacket.
That's right. Travel on up there, plus it's 25% cheaper. A dollar.
Is there a word you always misspell? Because I know you're in the business world. You send a lot of emails.
I do. I do use spell check
Yeah.
quite regularly. So I think I've kind of trained myself on that, but nothing comes to mind. But don't get me wrong, I do misspell things. There's nothing that I can think of that I consistently misspell.
Gotcha.
Do you have one that you know of mine? Like, does your brother say Mary Ann always misspells?
No. No.
Because he's looking at me like, you got one, and I know what it is.
I was just curious because, like, a woman from, like, just so much that you've done and how much, typing, writing, whatever. I was like, I wonder if there's one word that she would just never figure out.
Yeah, so I think I used to misspell separate a lot.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
And so my neighbor is a former teacher librarian, and she has all these little tricks, and she was telling my daughter, she's like, oh, you should remember things like, separate, there's an A before the R and an A after the R. And so I'm like, note to self.
Got it.
So I didn't misspell it after that. So like things like that.
Going back to your job, so you've been in sales pretty much the whole time throughout your career, is that correct?
Yeah, well, I was in sales for the first probably 20 years of my career, and then I went into sales management, and then I was the COO I built a strategic account organization, so that's really still sales management, and then was the COO of Supplemental Healthcare, which is a staffing company. So I moved into operations.
So I think a real fear for people is like finding something they like and then falling out of love with it, especially if it's a career. So do you think that, obviously you've changed jobs a lot throughout your career, but was there ever a time you remember just thinking like, I don't want to do sales anymore?
Never.
No,
but I didn't want to be in sales that wasn't like my initial goal. Like I wanted to be in sports marketing. I wanted to do the marketing sort of, advertising research, that aspect of it, and took the sales job, honestly, to get out of Peoria. And that's when I was like, wait a minute, this truly is, I really love it. And probably the main reason is because it is the great equalizer in terms of pay, right? It doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are, if you're male or female, or what your background or socioeconomic background is. If you're good at it, you can make a ton of money.
Yeah.
So
it kind of just goes off of you're in control more than something about you holding you down.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense. I never looked at sales that way. Honestly, I've always thought of sales as this monotonous, horrible thing.
Yeah.
And
I think
everybody
looks.
Absolutely.
But it's like,
there's some people I know that look at business like, oh, how could you?
I know. Well, so I was telling you, I grew up between two boys. They're both engineers. My older brother, the rocket scientist. My younger brother is a semiconductor chip engineer. And so we all graduated around the same time. And I'm the salesperson, right? Who they think is like, the person, yes. So, yes, exactly. Like we're the engineers building and creating and inventing things. And so they would talk about the sellers in their company that don't know how to sell and give things away. And, sales is like the used car salesman sort of mentality. So the dinner table was always a lot of fun for the first maybe 2 years. But after that, like click into year 3, click into year 4, I start to make as much money as they are, maybe tiny bit more. And they're like, wait, hold on. Like,
you're
they're like, salespeople should not make as much money as us smart engineers. So, but that kind of it was kind of my personality, I think. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed meeting people.
What advice would you give to that low 20-year-old-ish that they're just like, I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do?
One step at a time. Seriously, like it doesn't matter. You are so young. Why do you need to know what you need to do? Like, I will tell you this. When I was probably, 4 or 5 years into my job, my sales job, I was at 100 Plus Club, so it's a rewards event, and I am playing a golf scramble, and the vice president of sales is in my team, which is kind of a big wig, right? Like my boss's boss's boss. And he says, so, Mary Ann, what do you want to do? Where do you want to be in 5 years? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I just probably want to be a VP of whatever. I actually said that. I want to be a VP of whatever. But I didn't know. People are just too hard on themselves. Like, you shouldn't have to know. Just go do something.
I'm incredibly hard on myself all the time. And I'm guessing you aren't. Because, the vibe I get from you is, you... this sounds awful to say, and I'm not saying that I don't, but, you love who you are and you know who you are.
Yeah, I don't know if it's that. Thank you for that. I think it's more, maybe there's like this fine line between reality and denial. I don't know. But I guess I've always had the attitude of, why look back? Like, everything happens for a reason. Bad things happen. And guess what? I've lived through them. I'm still here. Like, I have lived through my worst days, all of them. Mm-hmm. And I don't really feel like revisiting them, So I guess that's what it is. It's like I can do anything the boys can do.
Just go for it.
Thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah.
All right. Final question. I'm very interested in your answer. So if your life were a book, what would be the title?
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah, you probably would be. I was going to say.
It might be, like you can do because the boys can.
Yeah, you can do anything the boys can do. Yeah, I mean, that's probably it. That's probably the most life-shaping, and I've got a lot of advice from Mom that I could put in that book. So,
right.
Yeah.
Next goal, write book.
Have you been able to mentor, obviously you are because of all your volunteer experience, but just the particular females, I feel like you have such a good aura of really being able to grab them and be like, hey, you can do this. Has there been any circumstances you've had where you've figured out that you have had that impact?
Yeah, I think that's probably why I love my job so much and loved being a sales manager, because it's much like being a teacher.
Yeah.
And teachers that can help shape sort of people's futures and things like that. So yeah, there's been a lot of that. I think it took me a while to realize that it was happening because I was just me, I'm just a regular person. And so people are like, no, you're actually a vice president. People are a little scared of you. And I'm like, what? They're scared of me? But so I think that it took me a while to realize that. And then that was good for me to be a little more intentional about it.
I mean, you've obviously put your you've worked your ass off throughout your career, but does it cool to sit back and look damn, I've accomplished incredible things and I deserve to be where I am?
Would it be bad to say yes?
No.
No, I would, if I was, I would be like, this is it.
Yeah, I mean,
you're obviously still hungry for more though. It's not like you're just yeah, I'm good.
But I think it's, it's changed, right? There you go through these stages where you're like, I've got to learn everything, I've got to be everything, I've got to grow and compete. And by the way, as you all probably can tell, the competing part is
big.
It's not gone. Right. But I think just my focus on wanting to mentor people is certainly way higher now than it was 20 years ago. So it's just the shift in what I want to accomplish. But no, I'm really happy with what I've accomplished. And if nothing else, if they said you have to retire tomorrow because, whatever, I would. I'd find something else to do, but I wouldn't feel like, oh man, I missed all of my career.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. You boys have anything else?
No, but I mean, I feel like that's got to go with the whole sales thing. Your brain just sounds like it's wired to think that way, and I think with sales, at least, I watched my dad start a company and do that, and he was always very sales oriented. So I always watched him go what's the next thing? I have to keep providing for my family, keep put food on the table. And I feel like that's the sales thing, because you're the controller of how much you make, how successful you are. So it's constantly that I'm not going to sit here.
Exactly. Because if I do, I'm broke.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm surprised you guys didn't ask anything about the COVID business in the COVID world.
Oh.
Because on your blogs, you talk about it.
Yeah.
And I also feel because I know you guys have obviously had to adjust with COVID and everything, but it's I'm
tired of it.
No, it's not. I mean,
I'm tired of it.
Who isn't? And I just think people are that those answers are out there if they want to search for them. And so I think it's on if those people are looking for those answers, they can get them. So I just wanted to reach on you as Mary Ann and kind of figure out how you deal with adversity and
Okay.
stuff like that through your life.
Got it.
But all right.
All
Thank
right.
you so much
Thanks.
for coming on.
Thank you.
My
Yeah.
pleasure.
This is an absolute blast.
Real quick,
What?
is there anywhere that you want to like anything you want to promote while you're here?
Oh, you mean like no? That's
Like,
okay.
do you have a book out that you want to send people to? Do you?
You should write a book.
You should write a book if you haven't. I
it
just
is-
assumed you had the way you carry
Yeah.
yourself. I'm like, she's an author.
Yeah, no, it's on my list. That's one of those things that like I'm like I got to get to this. It's on my list. Yeah.
Right.
New Year's resolution.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, thanks.
I just wanted to make sure.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Nope, all good.
Awesome.
Julio.
All right.
Oh, she's got a body, she's a hottie, she's a 10, and I'm not stopping till I get it, I'm on top, yeah. She flaunts it when she wants it, she's a tease, but oh, she got me, and I'm tripping over my heels, yeah.